This is something I found myself shocking people with whenever I tell them this, that the Trail of Tears was unconstitutional. They go, of course it was. I go, no, I mean literally John Marshall.
Oh, that's right.
Sided with Worcester,
Right.
a.k.a. the Native Americans. The Trail of Tears was unconstitutional from the day they did it. But it is important to remember that we view that as unconstitutional the entire history of the Constitution. There was never a point. This isn't something where like opinions change or application change. No, we literally were like, no, you can't do that. And Jackson, quoting him directly, Jackson reportedly quipped, John Marshall has made his decision. Let him enforce it. And that's where you
him
and
and his
army.
army. Yeah, yeah. Hello and welcome back to The Buck Starts Here, the podcast that digs deep into the juicy stories, power plays, and wild twists that shape the presidencies of the United States. I'm Kyle, that's Eric, and we're wasting no time so we can finally move on after this week.
I'm so happy to be done with Jackson, but it will traumatize me for the next, until we're done with the Civil War, until my palate can be refreshed by Abraham Lincoln's presidency.
All right, so what are we doing today?
This was a special request episode that I wanted to do, which is the legacy of Jackson in Native American affairs, because I don't think there's any president who's had a greater impact on Native Americans in the U.S. than Jackson. It's one of those things that as I was drafting the Jackson script, it became a more and more interesting sub-note to everything I was writing, and I thought just out of respect, because we talked about it a little bit as we went through, a lot of it as we went through
you can't just gloss over it, though. It really deserves its own, like, real attention paid to it.
Yeah, absolutely, Kyle. And so what I talked to Kyle about is that if we, and Kyle's gracious enough to humor me, is that if we could do an episode to run down Andrew Jackson's relationship with Native Americans and kind of talk about everything we kind of hinted at, or maybe discussed briefly through the last 3-4 episodes of the series. And I just thought it would be interesting if we just put this in chronological order, so that if you're interested in this discussion, you can go back and be like, hey, that jogged my memory, let me look more into it. This is nowhere near comprehensive, but Kyle and I just think it's kind of like the right thing to do, since we kind of hinted at this thing the entire time.
I really want
I
really want the context of, like, what shaped it, like, how he viewed them. Like, how did we get to the point where you're, like, forcing everybody off their lands and driving them to Oklahoma like freaking cattle?
Yeah, exactly. And it really starts towards the end of the War of 1812. And so what happens is, that's where Andrew Jackson became famous. He was already kind of rising up in that military status. He had married Rachel. He had climbed up. He'd become the gentleman farmer, the soldier farmer. He did have a knack for military operations. I think that's just something, whether you like the guy or not. As much as I make fun of the Battle of New Orleans, and I will continue to make fun of the Battle of New Orleans, you've won a victory after war was over. You are not Eisenhower. That's not how that works. You should not be considered in the same category.
That will be another shorter episode one of these days. We will do a Lafitte episode.
Yeah, we will. Yeah, we'll. When I get back from vacation, we should do that one. That'd be kind of fun. People were like, "Oh, he didn't know the war is over." Okay, that's fine. You're completely right saying that. On top of it doesn't count. Two things can be true.
The war was over. The battle does not count.
So exactly. So in now, if you guys remember from our War of 1812 episode, we talked about there's a lot of Native American upheaval that the Brits fermented as a way to kind of tie down a lot of U.S. troop movements, both in what would be, what you'd think of the United States in 1812, like states and territories, but also on the frontier.
Didn't they like entice them to occupy a bunch of forts that were left?
It was something like 50 forts. It was a lot. But in 1814, Jackson led U.S. forces in a victory over Red Stick Creeks at the Battle of Horseshoe Bend, and it was a pretty horrific affair, but it was also a decisive victory in that conflict for the U.S., and it resulted in something called the Fort Jackson Treaty, or the Treaty of Fort Jackson. If you're ever signing a treaty that's named after a fort, named after the general you fought against, you're in the worst negotiating position possible.
Yeah.
You did not win. It was considered exceptionally harsh even for that time.
Wow.
Really, it was bad. And the Creek Nation basically had to surrender 22 million acres of its ancestral land. That's about half of Alabama.
Yeah.
That is a lot of area. And so Jackson, it wasn't just that they lost. They also had all these very punitive terms, and it not just affected the Creek, it also affected any of what he called their allies, which, as you can imagine, Jackson did not bother to make distinctions
I'm gonna
between Native
guess,
American tribes.
yeah, any Native American would be considered an ally.
Yeah. And Jackson would kind of continue this all the way up to 1818.
Before we move too far past that, can we just take a step back before the War of 1812? Was there anything documented during his childhood while growing up in the Appalachians? Wait, is that where he grew up? Where was it, Waxhaw?
Yeah, Waxhaw.
Yeah. I assume he had a lot of interactions with native tribes during his youth or during those early years. Is there anything mentioned on that?
No, there's not a lot mention of that. Again, there's not a lot of writings on his early childhood. He was a poor orphan.
The only thing I could find was that he had knowledge of the languages, and that served him well as in roles with negotiating and other things like that.
Yeah. That's pretty much the extent of it. But we don't have a lot of direct firsthand journals and stuff because remember, people don't know if it's like a king or a prince when they know they're going to be king one day.
Yeah.
Poor kid whose brother and mother and father all died really young. So if there is something, we don't really have a primary source. It wouldn't surprise me if he did, but we just don't have anything to say with a lot of confidence. If you have any experience with tribes prior to that.
It's just crazy to me because you think that living in close proximity and likely probably relying on them in certain situations, typically that is the answer to, bigotry, is exposure to them.
It's called the Aunt Sally effect.
Right.
If anybody wants to look up my TED Talk, I can explain as an explanation what this Aunt Sally effect is.
Ooh, I'll link that. Is that on YouTube?
That's on YouTube,
Yeah, I'll link it.
Oh, well, that's good. I can't wait for just absolute crap talking in the comments.
I love that idea.
But no, I explain it in there. In short, if the more unique a culture is, the less likely there is to have sectarian differences. Because your Aunt Sally may be a different religion or different nationality, but you go, I love my Aunt Sally. She has a place in heaven.
Right.
Aunt Sally effect. Love it. Not my idea. It's Harvard economist of the 60s. So as we advance towards 1818, Jackson never really stops fighting native tribes. So by 1818, he has this reputation, and the direct quote is this: who's the Indian fighter, and he engages in the Seminole Wars, which we talked about, which is basically during the first Seminole War and later the second Seminole War, was basically him going into him justifying invading Florida.
Somehow, his Seminole War included Spain?
Basically, yes. He was
okay.
now to recap, basically the Seminoles were being paid by Spain to go into Georgia and Alabama and basically raid.
If Spain was paying for it, I'm suddenly back on Jackson's side on that one now.
Yeah, how much Spain was paying for the attack on innocent women and children is a little gray. I don't think that's what they were intending. So I don't know. Everybody's kind of at fault here to a certain degree. Besides the innocent people being attacked on both sides. But I don't know. This is common knowledge, I think it is, that Georgia was originally a buffer state for the tobacco, cotton, and indigo growing that was occurring in the Carolinas. So this is kind of Georgia doing its job, and then cotton became king, and Georgia's obviously one of the largest cotton producers. So this became a big economic threat, and it was basically guerrilla warfare, hit-and-run guerrilla warfare being funded by a European power. And so Jackson goes down there and is hey, patrol
removes
the
European power.
Yeah, he's patrol the borders. And he's what if I topple the governor? It's what? Who told you can do that? Well, and then his rival at the time, later in life, but at the time they weren't getting along too great either, John Quincy Adams comes down there and defends him. He's hey, Spain, real quick, we get it. We get that. We don't know why you want Tallahassee, but we get it that you're upset. Cool. Real quick, maybe paying the Seminoles to raid our villages and raid our settlements that are in the United States wasn't a good idea, and you don't really have any legs to stand on because you're currently surrounded by a very fast-growing superpower. I would say superpower at the time, but very fast-growing economy. So maybe don't be an idiot. And was do you want Florida? And Adams was yes, I want Florida. And that's why you have the Onus-Adams Treaty. So honestly, if Jackson and Adams could bond together, pretty unstoppable duo. Jackson also, but the funniest part about Jackson was that he would raise the U.S. flag on top of the Spanish capitals as he was taking them over.
Oh my God. How many towns did he
three? Three governorships he conquered.
How much of a fight was there for each of them?
I think it was pretty decent.
Yeah.
But at this point, I mean, I don't think there was a large Spanish contingency at any of these. There wasn't a large garrison.
No, and plus this is like his own personal army that he's been training for the last like 10 years.
Who love him because he
Yes.
like paid for him to come home
Yes.
and all that stuff. Yeah, no, he was well liked by his troops. So during this time period between 1814, so the Battle of Horseshoe Bend, to 1824, which is really when Jackson starts looking at running. With the election of 1824 is quite controversial, as we covered in a different episode. Jackson ended up negotiating 9 of the 11 treaties that dealt with Native Americans, and basically divested Southern tribes from a massive portion of their lands in exchange for land, quote, west of the Mississippi. So specifically, that's would eventually become like Oklahoma, some parts of Arkansas. I don't know if some areas of modern Texas, but that's a whole weird thing that happened way after Jackson.
I feel like we just didn't realize how much there was out west when we made that deal either.
Yeah, it'd be great if we just gave them everything west of the Mississippi accidentally. It's like, damn.
It kind of sounds like what we did. I think like maybe might want to revisit that agreement. It still stands. I mean, wasn't there like a deal where like Oklahoma like lost like half of the state to the native
a pretty
tribes?
large portion of it.
Yeah.
But Oklahoma was founded for the resettlement of Native Americans, so it's kind of like what came first, Oklahoma or the resettlement of Native Americans, or vice versa. But what this ends up leading to is by the mid-1820s, Jackson, through these treaties, basically gave the United States control over 3/4 of Alabama and Florida and the huge portions of Georgia, Tennessee, Mississippi, Kentucky, and North Carolina. And it was this massive transfer of indigenous lands to white control. But this all happened before he was president.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was kind of an interesting thing that happened. Just this is before, we're still pre-presidential Jackson, which in this same era, what we saw was a lot of the native nations adopting new strategies to kind of fight back against American expansion. And it was mostly the Cherokee, Cree, Choctaw, Chickasaw, and Seminoles.
So is it the 5 nations or the 7 nations?
The five
nations.
civilized nations. I believe the 7 nations is the Iroquois. And
okay,
it's more northern.
okay.
Yeah, it's because I think the 7 nations is actually recognized by Canada too. So
I thought I was losing my mind there because not knowing that there was a 5 and a 7. That I'm glad I wasn't.
We can always do a side dive on that. I didn't prepare for a discussion of the 7 nations.
We should, yeah.
And they got together and they adopted different elements. This is where it gets interesting. So the 5, and again, I'm quoting the terminology used at the time, right? The 5 civilized tribes.
Mm-hmm.
They started pursuing policies of accommodation and assimilation. They adopted Anglo-American cultures. They stopped their hunter-gathering lifestyle, and they started doing settled agriculture. They adopted the Western education system. They had written laws. They even started owning slaves.
Nothing more American?
That became a very strange issue in U.S. history. And they were basically trying to demonstrate that they could coexist and even be seen as civilized in Americans' eyes. But it didn't work.
No.
And what ended up happening is they saw this success in farming and all this stuff, and actually made a lot of white settlers at the time become even more covetous of their fertile farmland. It kind of showed like, this land has value. And so then individuals, and then later the United States and other individual states acting on their own, went to buy their land. And this again, quote, civilized tribes, they got together and they refused to sell land, and eventually in 1827 declared themselves a sovereign nation.
Mm-hmm.
And it was mostly Seminole and Creek factions took up armed resistance and started those. This is part of the First Seminole War, and a slew of other conflicts. I mean, there's a million different names for some of them. And so basically this actually ends up in a bunch of Supreme Court cases. There's John versus Mintosh, that was in 1823. It held that tribes had a right of occupancy. Ultimate title belonged to the United States, and this basically neutered any ability for them to claim permanent land ownership. And
I
then
thought that court case recognized their tribal sovereignty, did it not?
that'd be later in 1829 and then during Worcester versus Georgia. But this is under the last year of Monroe.
1823. Yeah, because he's single
1823.
term. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
So then Jackson becomes president. He becomes president in 1828. So he has inauguration in 1829. And you end up with the Indian Removal Act of 1830, which is his first legislative priority. It's passed. It's his first major piece of legislation passed, which will show you how.
It's probably the first day he got
priority.
to the White House, because it probably took about 2 months to get there, right?
It's just like walking.
Yeah.
And this gave, and as we covered in the episode that we touched on this, it didn't give the right, it didn't, let me rephrase this, it didn't require Native Americans to move to lands out west. It gave the executive branch the ability to negotiate treaties between land in the eastern portion of the United States and the western portion, for lands in the western portion of the United States for Native tribes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to sound pedantic, but I do think sometimes the Indian Removal Act gets described as literally like
Just
immediately
pick them
causing
up
the Trail
and
of Tears.
yeah. It wasn't quite that point A to point B. It was there was the theater of negotiation, I think, in between that.
Yes. In this, the vast majority of these lands out west, and Kyle, this is what I was getting to, that you sniped early on. This is where Oklahoma begins to become what we now know is what Oklahoma is today. In the U.S., and this is a direct quote, the land was to be granted the tribes, quote, forever under U.S. protection. Never happened. I think we're all pretty aware of that.
Yeah.
I guess unless you argue that it's from foreign protection. If I had to live one place in the United States to be protected from a foreign invader, Oklahoma is probably it. So Jackson immediately exploits this law. He uses bribery, threats, coercion to get people to sign it. What's interesting is a lot of people act like this was unanimously approved through Congress. Well, the Senate approved it 28-19. The House only approved it 102 to 97. And opposition came not only from the affected tribes, they had really little voice in Congress, but it came from a coalition of religious activists, national Republicans and proto-Whig Party members, and ordinary citizens that basically argued that forcing Native peoples off their lands is violating American ideals and treaty obligations. So this idea that, like, the wrongs that were done to the Native Americans is like a modern thing. It's no. It was literally, there was always a group of people yelling about this.
Which was John JQA? Was he was a senator after he left again? Right?
He was in the House of Reps.
Okay, so I imagine he was probably the one leading that contingent.
Yeah, I don't believe he was elected at this point, but yeah, he'd become very supportive of that. And Jackson gets really weird with this, because this is Jackson that does have a very strong paternalistic view of this, and we mentioned in a previous episode, where basically he argues that white settlers and natives can't exist in the same area. It's going to wipe out the Native American tribes, so I'm better off moving them. And if I move them, then I'm being nice.
See, I would believe that more if you weren't such a dick when it came to the negotiations.
Yep.
And when it came to actually like moving them.
Yeah, he called it a happy consummation. That's what he described it as.
Oh, yes.
It was a benevolent policy, he said.
When did the name Trail of Tears get levied?
Yeah. Can I read you an excerpt from Andrew Jackson's message to Congress on the Indian removal of 1830? Yeah. This is the National Archives, so this is a .gov website, so before I get yelled at. So it's kind of a two-part, but on the removal, he told Congress that he would allow those states to advance rapidly in population, wealth, and power. And so basically saying, if you let me remove the natives, then you're going to grow economically. That's why it's important for us to do. And he continued that perhaps the cause of the Indians, that's what he called them, perhaps the cause of the Indians gradually to cast off their savage habit and become an interesting, civilized, and Christian community under the protection of the United States. So it was patronized.
Really, that is really,
yeah. And one of my favorite things is shout out to New Jersey Senator Theodore. I cannot pronounce his last name. It's not a word.
Frayling Hoyson.
Yeah, let's go with that.
Frayling Hoyson.
New Jersey Senator Theodore, Kyle, what is it? Frayling Hoyson?
Frayling Hoyson?
he responded to what he called a cruel and unjust bill with a 6-hour speech against the bill, where he basically ripped apart him. Yeah. Interesting
awesome.
note here. David Crockett, who was a congressman at the time, broke with other Jacksonian Democrats and opposed the bill.
Really?
He was it was super unpopular, and it was bad for his political career, but he just couldn't stand it.
Huh.
Yeah.
I think we need to give Davy Crockett a little more love than maybe we have in the past.
Yeah, I mean, he still died fighting for slavery in Texas. So I don't know how much.
Yeah.
That was Davy Crockett, right?
He died in 1836.
Yeah, it's at the Battle of
At the Alamo. Yeah. All right, never mind.
I don't want to yeah, it's just you're fighting for slavery. It's one of my more controversial opinions that the
Alamo were the bad guys.
The Alamo's the bad guys.
Yeah,
I just call me a jerk. But yeah, there was actually this writer Jeremy Evarts, really interesting guy if you ever dig in on him. But he basically published a bunch of these articles that were quite popular that basically rebuked Jackson's view of hey, this is, there could become a Christian community saying it was incredibly unchristian and a shame for the nation's Christian honor. That's the term he used, to remove the Cherokee from their land. And there's a bunch of reformers at the time. So this, again, it's the idea that the Native Americans were mistreated is not a contemporary idea. It was an idea very apparent at that time.
Just not enough to get the majority, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't know if it was the majority. It was not enough to.
Well, they held enough of the voting block. I mean, to get the things passed.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I meant the populace, referendum majority.
Gotcha.
But no, you're correct. Yeah, they passed it. And this will culminate exactly what you were saying earlier, Kyle. So under the Indian Removal Act, Jackson, signed over 70 removal treaties, mostly through intimidation, some through, and I put in quotation marks, diplomacy. A lot of times Jackson himself intervened and even challenged people. And the best example of this was Worcester vs. Georgia in 1832. This is something I found myself shocking people with whenever I tell them this, that the Trail of Tears was unconstitutional. They go, of course it was. I go, no, I mean literally John Marshall.
Oh, that's right.
Sided with Worcester, a.k.a. the Native Americans. The Trail of Tears was unconstitutional from the day they did it. Not that is some sort of victory. I don't want to sound like a victory for the U.S., but it is important to remember that we view that as unconstitutional the entire history of the Constitution. There's never a point. This isn't like the Dred Scott decision, right? This isn't the Fugitive Slave Act that we'll get to. This isn't something where opinions change or application change. No, we literally were no, you can't do that. And Jackson, quoting him directly, Jackson reportedly quipped, "John Marshall has made his decision. Let him enforce it." And that's where you and his army.
Yeah.
And so, very anti-constitutionalist. When people talk about constitutional crises, I'm always we've had way worse constitutional crises, including one time a president leading an armed transportation to a concentration camp against the orders of the Supreme Court.
Dude, that is wild to me. Has this happened since anything this extreme? Just blatantly disregarding? Did anything come about this after the fact at any point in time? Did he ever face any repercussions for his actions?
No, he never did. He got put on the $20 bill.
And
this is why things are pointed out this episode. He had violated the court rulings. He had violated treaties, ripped apart the Constitution, and at the end of the day, Jackson just refused to enforce federal laws. The other times we talked about the use of federal force related to Supreme Court rulings, I think there's one we should be proud of, which is about the Brown versus the Board of Education.
Is the desegregation?
Yeah, and I think a lot of parts that don't get talked about then Brown v. the Board of Education, the reintegration of the Little Rock School district, is that the Arkansas governor called up the National Guard to stop desegregation, and Eisenhower went in and nationalized the National Guard. The National Guard of Arkansas, and made them integrate schools. But he also sent the 82nd Airborne. The 82nd Airborne, full of a bunch of veterans of World War II, against a bunch of 19-year-old kids trying to get college paid for. And then was listen, all I'm saying is I nationalized you, so you now listen to the president. you can join our side, which we're going to win. Like we're going to emphatically win. Or you can, not join our side and have the pudgy governor of Arkansas. Listen to him. Or again, I have the 82nd Airborne over here. I don't know what you want to do. I just know as the supreme commander of the Allied forces, I would take my advice.
So his was this like a lesson learned from the Jackson disregarding of that?
Oh, yeah.
You know what? We're just going to go ahead and bring the National Guard in here and just make this happen.
Yeah, and the reason I bring this up is because we see, and I mentioned it before, an ever-ending expansion of executive authority, and this is exceptional executive authority, literally just ignoring the Supreme Court's insane. From Jackson, using military forces to ignore the Supreme Court too, which is wild, from Jackson all the way up to Nixon and the War Power Acts. So Eisenhower is kind of at the pinnacle of that executive authority, and I think it's interesting to see in the right hands how somebody like a noble person like Eisenhower used it, where Eisenhower was like, we're desegregating the schools whether you like it or not. I mean, you can be on the right side of history, man. So executive authority becomes very problematic in the United States pretty much up until the war powers, and I'm sure there's people who would argue even to this day. It's good to have discussions, but if we go back to, this is where I think the Trail of Tears gets, I want to take a moment, and I have like a rundown of the trail, like what that was. Because we talk about the Trail of Tears as if it's like one event that happened one time, and it's not. So under the, essentially over the decade following the Removal Act, we had tens of thousands of Native Americans who had to leave their homeland, and this collectively became known as the Trail of Tears. But the Trail of Tears lasted, conservatively, you would say 8 years, between 1830 to 1838. The first were the Choctaw. Their Trail of Tears occurred their part of the Trail of Tears occurred between 1830 and 1833. And it was right after the Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek that was signed in 1830. And they ceded all their lands, all their Mississippi lands in exchange for territory in Oklahoma. And what became kind of weird was Jackson's negotiators promised that those Choctaws who wished to stay could register and be citizens of the state of Mississippi. He never allowed it.
Really? Huh.
Yep. And they ended up, they started their western trek, started in 1831 and 1833. So it was like 2 years, yeah.
Yeah.
And mostly on foot. They never really gave them supplies. They endured, obviously, winter.
It's insane that they even made it. Any of them made it. Because, I mean, we saw just how brutal the Oregon Trail, campaigns were just to get across with the wagon train and like a group of people.
Yeah. And so, obviously, it was mass death from cold and hunger. But that's where we get the name Trail of Tears. Actually, it was a Choctaw chief who called it a Trail of Tears and Death. And, kind of even sadly is that most of the Choctaw who tried to remain weren't just not allowed to become citizens. They were actually driven out west also. And this actually became a template for subsequent removals. Now, this is all being applied to the 5 civilized tribes, the ones that weren't fighting, the ones that were trying to assimilate. So this was especially to all those people who were against the Indian Removal Act, this was an extra thumb in the eye too. It was like, oh my, you're not even picking the ones who are fighting us. You're picking the ones, I mean, yes, it's the Seminoles, but that's a little bit of a different story. Like these are trying to be part of the U.S. They're trying to be citizens. Like, what are you doing? You're going after the people who like want to be Americans. This is insanity. And this is where the Second Seminole War, that's why I said it becomes a little complicated. I wasn't trying to reduce it down, but it becomes a little complicated because the Seminole Wars, which are like 1820s, 1830s, you have the Second Seminole War, 1830 to 1842, overlaps as they're trying to force people to leave. The Seminoles eventually just say, screw this, and they lead a hellacious war. It is, vicious resistance. It's a complete guerrilla warfare.
That's what happens. You take away all hope when you've got nothing left to live for, then you become very dangerous.
Exactly. And that Second Seminole War is ferociously fought. It is just, it's straight up guerrilla warfare. It's probably very similar to what Afghanistan warfare was.
Yeah.
Just Jackson sending troops. Jackson's getting frustrated because Jackson's like, I went down there and beat them in 1818. How come you can't do it? And they're like, this is a lot different than a bunch of people getting paid by Spain to mess with some farmers. This is like, you're talking about people, like you said, Kyle, fighting for their survival. But in 1832, a small group of unauthorized Seminoles signed what's called the Treaty of Payne's Landing. And it's basically agreeing to move, but most Seminole leaders are kind of like, who are these people?
Yeah.
But then the U.S. uses that, like, hey, you signed this, to basically declare war in 1835. And this is the beginning of there's a First and Second Seminole War. They're all fighting. It's constant fighting.
Yeah.
But this is where a lot of historians say Second Seminole War starts. And the U.S. actually, it's not National Guard, it's not militia. The U.S. Army is deployed in this massive campaign, and it's guerrilla warfare in the Florida swamps, which sounds horrible.
God, yeah.
And there's just, it's then freed slaves start joining the Native Americans, and Jackson would not leave office with this war being concluded. The war was still raging when he left office, and the war dragged into the 1840s. It cost thousands of people down on both sides, including thousands of U.S. troops, and it cost $60 million.
Jeez.
Now, if we remember from our last episode, the federal budget 1837,
it was 50 million.
yeah,
Wasn't
it was
half
50 million.
Yeah.
So, like, could you imagine us spending $6 trillion? We spent $1 trillion in Afghanistan. People over 20 years, people are like, oh, that's crazy.
This is like almost 20% of the GDP or something
this
like
would be like $8 trillion over the course of 7 years.
Jesus.
Yeah, that's wild. And in the end, most of the Seminoles were killed. There was a huge portion killed, and the rest were eventually forced to migrate. Now, as we kind of close out the Trail of Tears, you do then have the Creek. They're removed from Alabama and Georgia between 1832 and 1837. The Creek did sign a treaty that partitioned the remaining Alabama territory. It gave vast majority to the U.S., but individual Creeks were basically promised small reserved plots of land in their homeland. If they decided to leave, that obviously...
No, they got nothing, I'm sure.
Yeah, the U.S. government failed to prevent swarms of speculators and settlers from defrauding the Creek, basically making up fake deeds and then acknowledging them, and then they were basically driven off the land by the settlers. And in the final blow, Jackson's Secretary of War ordered the forced removal of the entire Creek Nation as a military necessity, and deported 15,000 Creek to the Indian Territory by 1837. Indian Territory will eventually become Oklahoma. And what's even weirder is the Creek actually never agreed. Every Native American tribe that was involved in this, whether it was acknowledged or not acknowledged, whether the people who signed it had the power or not, there is a treaty that was signed. Whether or not it was
legitimate or not is questionable.
And even questionable is a generous description.
Yeah.
None of that happened with the Creek. There's not a document the Creek signed. They never agreed to removal in any treaty, and their expulsion was literally just the U.S. showing up with weapons and just you push them until they got to Oklahoma.
Sounds like they have a case.
Oh yeah, I mean theirs is wild because they literally, there's not even like a fake treaty.
Right.
The Chickasaw also removed from Mississippi and Alabama, and theirs was an interesting one because there was they had a treaty they signed in 1832, and they basically agreed to sell all their land north of Mississippi on the condition they received suitable new lands in the West and federal protection until relocation. Now they just didn't do that. Like the U.S. government provided no help against encroachment of settlers, and the Choctaw ended up having to purchase land from the Choctaw, who had arrived. Remember, they were the first tribe to arrive out there in order to even have a place to live. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, their journey was forced to take place during the winter of 1837.
Good Lord.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, this gets horribly worse. So by migrating a little slightly earlier and largely on their own discretion, there was never a big gunfight. The Chickasaw avoided some of the chaos and the with the previous or the subsequent removals, but they paid a lot of money, both in lives and they they sold the eastern land to the eastern land for $3 million, which the U.S. withheld in a trust.
Of course they did.
Yeah, so the Chickasaw had to finance their own transportation and then buy their own land, essentially.
Actually, when was that deal signed?
1832.
Oh, okay. So never mind. Yeah, it's before the collapse.
It didn't go until 1838 before they finally moved out there. So you do still have the Panic of 1837. And the final one I want to talk about is the one that's most well known, and that is the Cherokee. Interesting enough, if you read history books, a lot of times the Trail of Tears start off with the Cherokee, which is interesting because the name comes from the Choctaw tribe. So I do just want to throw that out there. But,
actually, the last, not the first.
This proved to be very, very problematic for Jackson. So the Cherokee Nation, they went a different approach. They didn't trust that they were going to get paid. They didn't trust they would be able to keep a little bit of their land or anything like that. They went straight constitutional. And it's important to remember the Cherokee were not were not roaming tribes. They were not they weren't like the Comanche, and they weren't like the Cree. They were well established. They were a nation. I mean, they were a state in and of themselves. They had farms. They had a constitution. They had a written language. They had bilingual newspapers. But they were advanced. They were more advanced than the guys running around enslaving people and making them pick crops. This was a well-formed, well-established, probably more legitimate state than even some states at that time, but definitely more than some territories. But Georgia wanted to get rid of them, and they had Jackson's support. So Jackson's administration worked to secure a removal agreement by any means. Now, the Cherokee had a national council. They had essentially a Congress, and they just refused, and U.S. officials found a small faction of Cherokee who were willing to sign a treaty which basically traded all Cherokee lands in the southeast for land in Indian territory plus $5 million. They had no authority to represent the Cherokee.
Yeah, it'd be like if I signed a deal for the U.S.
Yeah, on top of the fact that the Cherokee had a representative body in government. Constitution. This was not like, I wonder who runs these people. They have a constitution. What are you talking? Go talk to. There's some guy running a newspaper in two languages. He probably knows who to talk to. Just go talk to that guy. Try. But in the end, iron makes right. So over 15,000 Cherokee, mostly adult population, were stored. They ended up signing a petition to Congress. They rejected this treaty, pleading for it not to be ratified. Jackson, didn't care, pushed the Senate to ratify the treaty in 1836. You're ratifying a treaty with literally not signed by anybody. It narrowly passes, but Daniel Webster, which New Hampshire, Massachusetts guy, and Henry Clay, both are, oh my God, you should read some of the transcripts in here. I mean, they still exist in the Congressional Archive. They're just going at it, mockingly so. Cherokee were given a 2-year deadline to remove themselves voluntarily. When that passed, over 16,000 Cherokee remained on the land. Martin Van Buren, a.k.a. Jackson in disguise, dispatched 7,000 troops under Winfield, soon of Civil War fame, Winfield Scott, to enforce the removal in 1838. And they marched them by Bayonet Point west. Georgia militia and squatters promoted looting what was left. They were herded into stockades and traveled westward through the fall and winter of 38-39. They didn't really have a route plan. They didn't have supplies for them. Disease came out. And this is why the Cherokee are known for the Trail of Tears, more so than the Choctaw, despite the Choctaw naming it. It's estimated that between 4,000 of the 16,000 Cherokee died, a 25% fatality rate. To give you an idea, that is the same fatality rate of people who flew bomber missions over mainland Europe during World War II. So climbing in a B-17, same danger of this relocation. That's pretty insane.
That's wild, man.
Yeah. And the Cherokee call it Nana Dal Suni, or the Trail Where They Cried, which is where they get the Trail of Tears, circle back to actually becoming part of the Cherokee tradition too. And this would mark the end of Jackson's administration. This is March 1837, so we're done. Jackson, he'd be proudly claimed credit that for relocating 46,000 Native Americans, and they were all voluntary. And there's even more displaced. Some say that the final count's near 500,000 from the civilized tribes and associated tribes. For 25 million acres, which is probably not even a good trade-off.
Yeah.
Yeah, not even. Just, and by this point, there would be no significant indigenous nations remaining in the American Southeast. So the region was emptied out.
Jeez.
And again, I want to be clear. The anger of this was not something that started in modern times.
People have always been upset at this.
People have always been angry at this. This isn't some new thing like, we're now realizing it. No, everybody was angry all the time about this. And my favorite one is Jackson's doing they're all voluntary. And it's like, you yelled at the Supreme Court and deployed an army against the U.S.
Yeah,
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
It's not even a good lie. It's just a very easily disprovable lie. No, they were fine.
Here's the good thing, Eric. We get to take the microscope to his presidency and grade it.
Oh, let's begin this.
Are you ready
Zeros?
for that?
Yes.
Well, see, I'm afraid it's probably not going to be that simple. As people know, it's probably been a little bit since we've done one of these, but this is our patented POTUS scale that we use here. So we grade them on 5 points: their political influence, overall governance, transformational leadership, their understanding of public needs, and their strategic vision. The scale was arbitrarily chosen to be 1 through 7. I'm not sure why.
I like because 4 is in the middle. I like that.
You like an odd number in the middle?
Yeah.
We could have done 11.
Turn it to 11. Kyle's like, get out.
Our fourth drummer spontaneously combusted.
Spinal tap.
All right. So let's start with political influence. And I have remember, we got to be unbiased here.
Yeah, he's 7. He founded the Democratic Party. Again, I know, not the modern Democratic Party. I know, but it's a
his own version of. They named it after him. It was Jacksonian, the Jacksonian Party.
Yeah, it's literally Democrats even go to him or Jefferson as the founder. But Jefferson was a Democratic Republican. The first Democrat was Jackson.
So the next one here is going to be overall governance. This is the effectiveness of the president's administration in implementing policies, managing the bureaucracy, and maintaining stability and governance.
Oh, see, I don't think he's that high. By the way, I did want to fact check my check. Andrew Jackson is the first Democratic president.
Okay.
It wasn't the. I couldn't remember if he was going to be a Democratic Republican, but no, he wasn't. So I just.
Which of his policies was he not able to implement that he wanted to?
That's a good point. He got in a lot of fights in Congress, but more or less was able to implement.
I think you can hit him on stability and maybe managing the bureaucracy, but it sounds like he did a pretty good job managing the bureaucracy too.
Yeah, because he just bullied a lot of people and he had overwhelming support. The stability, I think, is problematic drag down there.
Yeah,
I think if you cause arguably the greatest depression, because we could, like you said, we can look back.
Yeah,
you shouldn't get credit for stability whatsoever. So I'm going to say a 3 out of 7.
Okay, I think that's.
I maybe would go with a 4. Agree to what am I? I was going to say 4, but the panic. Oh, that hurts.
Dude, the panic hurts, but man, he pushed everything through. Man, I feel like you got to give him a. I would have been probably a little higher until you reminded me about the stability portion of things.
Yeah. So what number did you put in?
I think we'll go with 4. I think 4 seems fair.
Yeah, we can do 4. I think it's fair, Kyle.
Transformational leadership, the president's capacity to enact significant change or reforms that alter the course of history. And did they address pressing societal issues and implement lasting change? Now, I want to be clear that our ranking here does not have a scale for morality. The fact that he implemented change does not necessarily mean it was good change.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, do we discount good? If it's bad change?
I don't think we do. Okay. He just wasn't on the side that we wanted him to be on. He still was able to do all these things.
We say lasting change. What do we mean by are we talking about how long is this still go? Because realistically,
his party still exists.
Yes,
somewhat. He put us on the course for the bloodiest conflict in the nation's history.
Yeah, so he shouldn't get credit for that.
I mean, it's not necessarily credit, but I mean, he did alter the course of history, did he not?
Yeah, okay, I'll give you that. Okay.
He enacted significant changes and reforms.
See, this is my thing. His changes and reforms only lasted they lasted 23 years.
20. Okay, so
That's my problem. Like,
I
if
see,
you look
okay.
at the stuff that John Quincy did,
Right.
you look at the stuff Jefferson did, and God, you look at the stuff Monroe did. Like, Monroe's stuff still, like, the Liberia still exists. Like, there's so much stuff Monroe did. So, like, that's where I'm not saying it didn't last a while. I'm just saying relative to, like, hindsight.
Okay. You can.
And maybe
you can bring that,
maybe
yeah.
it's not fair to compare him to Monroe, but even if I compare him to, like, Madison,
anything
right?
that he's done is that well, I mean, the stuff he did to the poor Native American population is still roiling today.
They're a state now, right? They're Oklahoma, so like those. Maybe he never intended those to actually to be tribal lands, but there's no tribal land. I mean, there are tribal lands, but not in the sense that Jackson did it.
Did he address pressing societal issues? I mean,
Oh God, no! He
did
literally just
kind of.
He just brushed it under the rug.
He did it the wrong way.
That's not addressing it.
He put the gag order in place. He
No, that was Congress that put the.
Okay,
you're right.
right.
You're right.
Right,
But
right.
also, what do you want to do?
What do you want here?
I want I want to be fair and do like. Can we do half points?
Yeah, okay. You do
4.5?
whatever you want, buddy. 4.5, all right.
You do 4.5. I feel 4.5. Like it shouldn't be average, but I just think like he did all this crazy stuff that like actually low key didn't last that long.
Yeah, well, initially when I was thinking about it, I thought that he had things that you had to look at as being like, yeah, that was a long-lasting change. 20 years, you're still feeling the effects. But I think you make a good point juxtaposing that with the changes of other presidents who are still being felt today.
Madison's second bank charter is like kind of the precursor to the Fed. Like just as much as I don't like Jefferson's bought a third of the country.
No, right.
Alien Sedition Act are still being discussed today, and we have 2 presidential term limits because of, well, like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so 4.5 then. All right, understanding of public needs. How well did he understand and respond to the needs and concerns of the American public?
See, this is where I can honestly say 1.
Really?
I think I'm a hard 1 on this, dude. So I have my notes for some reason I printed off my notes for last time. And they're still sitting on my desk. Dude, I just don't think he did. Like, you get his rejection of the American system. Like, they wanted to build roads to service commerce within states, and he's like, oh, I don't like Henry Clay because he didn't accept my corrupt offer, blah, blah, blah. So, like, he didn't, like, invest in roadways within states, and like, oh, but he did the Cumberland Road, but like, all right, that was clearly a political favor. Like, let's not act like he was doing that. And like, well, all these populists loved him. Dude, he cut all these people who like had jobs and stuff. He took them away with the Panic of 1837. And I think whenever you cause like the worst panic and the worst contraction of the labor force ever seen in your country, like you don't understand the needs of your people. Like, oh, I only want people buying stuff with gold because I don't understand how trade works. Like, no, you don't get credit for that. I think it's a 1. I think, and then if you look at all his Jackson's policies, which ones exist today? Like, I'm dead serious. Like, what policy from Jackson can you point at that exists today that you're like, okay, no, that's a leftover vessel of Jackson. He ended up being wrong on everything.
I don't think this one gets judged necessarily on longevity. This one gets judged on how well he understood the needs of the public at the time and how well he responded to those needs and concerns. Did he engage with citizens and address their priorities effectively?
I don't think he did. I'm just trying to say, like, what citizens?
Well, there apparently was enough people complaining about Indians.
But, like, was there? Like, I'm not trying to be
I
because
don't
a
know.
lot of people were also anti it.
Right. But, I mean, it was the first thing he did, so obviously there was popular support to the thing,
I
right?
just think he hated Native Americans. I don't think there's a great, like, comparison. What are yours? I'm yelling. You talk. You're smarter than me. What are we doing here?
Okay, for the memes of it, I think it'd just be amazing if it went 7770.
That'd be kind of funny.
Like all 7s and 1 0. I had 0 under strategic vision, and I was ready to go 7s across the board.
You were going to go 7 on this one?
I felt like I could have. I felt like I could make an argument on all of these, but not for good reasons. Like he was doing all these things like it's all the wrong shit you want to see done, but he was just catering to the wrong side.
Kyle, if you're going to say making a contemporary argument, then absolutely. The guy's like probably a 6 because he's a populist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm fine going with a 6 if you're saying, Eric, look at this on a contemporary bubble. I'm not joking when you are a lot smarter than me, especially when it comes to like the social aspects of of judging these. Like,
I feel like your arguments are pretty strong too, though.
My arguments are strong because I'm just yelling and I have a Boston accent, so it sounds
no.
convincing.
No. If you're elected to take care of these people and address their needs, and you immediately cause them to all go out of work and basically tank the most productive sectors of the economy, okay, maybe you could maybe we'll give him a 2 then. We'll go ahead and split the difference and give him a little boost for being popular.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where it's the mythos of Jackson that always frustrates me because I'm like, show me what he did. Like, show me besides being his whole presidency's full of like weird stuff of him like not actually being that successful as a president. We just
You were really willing to go from a 1 to a 6 on that?
Yes, because it's all about the framing. If you're saying like, Eric, I want you to look at what happened in 1828 and what happened in 1832. And then the immediate aftermath of that, I get it. He's a populist. I have a hard time. I think I'd be being intellectually dishonest with you if I said, like, I don't agree. Oh, he wasn't really a populist. And I just did I'm pretty sure there's going to be a short of me screaming about populism. So, I mean, that's intellectually disingenuous. I'm looking at it like what happened over the next 20 years of the people who voted for him and were expected to make decisions for the rest to, like, affect the rest of their lives.
Let's look at it over the course of his term.
Yeah, then he's a 5 or a 6. Absolutely,
I think you can go even less than that. I think though. I think your argument of bankrupting the entire population.
But that happened after he left office. That happened in 1837. That's where my argument falls apart.
No, we got to split the difference on that. It's too big of a. It's too obviously him that caused it to not hit him for it.
Yes, I just really think if the Panic of 1837 doesn't happen. He'd be. You could do the 777 like 6.
Yeah.
And if we don't like the idea, we gave Jefferson like 28 points. So
I know, ridiculous. All right, so what does this one be? If we're going to factor in that, we're going to factor in the Panic of 1812, but also keep in mind that the contemporary aspect of things. Then, like we said,
that's a 5 or 5.5 because of the populism. Like. He's the first populist president. I think that's a big thing. We talk about the needs of his people. They elect him, and then they re-elect. If you re-elect a populist,
re-elected him, yeah.
Yeah, that's why. If he was a one-termer, I'd be way more aggressive on this.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think 5's fair. All right, strategic vision 0.
-5.
Can we do that?
Can we just 0? Just you caused the worst recession in U.S. history.
Hold on, wait. Can we do negatives?
I don't think we should do negatives because then it's
all right.
How am I going to grade James Buchanan?
Very negative.
I think James Buchanan would be really fun to be 1, 1, 1, 1.
So what does this give us score wise here? Then we've got 8.5 plus 5 is 13 plus 7 20.5.
Okay.
I think that's right. Oh, he just falls under Adams. I think.
JQA.
The first Adams, I think.
Okay.
I think the first Adams got 21.
That makes me sad, but that makes sense, actually.
2, 6 plus 6 is 12 plus 10. They got 22.
Okay. Just dude, without the Panic of 1837, he's easy probably first place in this.
No, because I'm still digging him on strategic vision. Even if he gets 7s across the board, he just ekes out like 4th place, I think, on our Mount Rushmore.
If it's a 3-way, race among Washington, Madison, Monroe, we're doing a good job.
Oh yeah, we've got a pretty solid Mount Rushmore. If we could just stop the show now, I think it would be perfect.
Yeah, petition to change Mount Rushmore.
Except we need to get the bottom half. We need to get our Mount Slowness finished off first.
Slowness.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's probably going to do it for today, right? I think we got through everything.
I think we got through everything. Thank you.
We got through Jackson finally, too. So join us next week. What are we doing next week? Are we moving on to Martin Van Buren?
Yes, we're going to go to Martin Van Buren, and I'm going to be sad.
Yeah? How many episodes do you think he's going to get?
He deserves 0. He deserves to be mocked. No, about 2 episodes. I talk about his early life, his presidency. We could probably do 1 episode, and then there's a couple cool stuff that happened around this time period that I think would be interesting to talk about.
Those we can call the Panic of 1837 maybe part of his too. Maybe I'll call that his part 3.
Yeah, that's not bad, actually.
All right, well, if you guys want to give us some suggestions of how to handle that, you can email us that at buckstartsherepodcast@gmail.com. You can also visit the website of the same name. Don't forget to sub on your favorite platform so you never miss a president, and we will see you all next week.
Woo. Boo!
Produced by China Shop Productions.